Welcome to Perspectives with Mzu.
Welcome back to part 2 of our podcast conversation with Teboho Victor Mongoato, a Black commercial farmer based in an area called Matatiele, which borders the Eastern Cape and Free State. We had a conversation with him during part 1 of our podcast where we were exploring questions related to commercial farming for Black people in South Africa, some of the challenges that they are confronted with, especially in the value chain as well as in finance, where we ended. If you haven't listened to part 1, I would highly recommend you listen to part 1 of our podcast. Where we ended was just talking about how far we've come as a country from the time when the Rainbow Nation was proclaimed by the former President Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu. And we were looking at where has that taken us as Black people in South Africa, whether that has advanced the Black people in South Africa in socio-economic terms. Do we have Black commercial players in the economy, the mainstream economy? Has the structure of the economy changed in any meaningful way since the onset of democracy? And we took a critical view in our last conversation where we said, this has not really generated the kind of benefits that were expected. Now, welcome back, Victor.
Thank you, Prof.
Now, just latching on to that conversation, I remember distinctly back in 1994, especially between 1994 and 1999, 1999, 94, 99, there was this air of optimism, expectation about what the Rainbow Nation would mean. And everyone was talking about unity, being a united country. We were galvanizing around this idea of a rainbow and non-racialism as a country. Where is that spirit today? Why are we not seeing the same positive, united force behind the empowerment of a Black person in South Africa today to see a huge mobilization for land reform, for socio-economic change, for overcoming race-based inequalities? Why was it so easy for the country to mobilize behind this idea of a rainbow nation? We mobilized behind our rugby team. But let's take Black people and transformation as today's rugby team that needs to be cheered and encouraged. Why are we not seeing that? And it's a simple thing. Why are we not seeing Black and white people promoting and working hard to advance the socio-economic plight of Black people in South Africa, given their systematic exclusion in the past?
Well, basically, I think it's just because of selfish reasons that those who have a cake says we cannot share the cake, we would rather grow the cake. But they forget that we don't have ingredients to actually be in the baking kitchen to actually grow the cake. We need to share it before we can grow it. So that I am at the level where you are in terms of the strength of being able to partake and be able to make that dough that will make this cake to be bigger. I can't participate from a weak point when you are you have the upper hand. I'm at a lower level. So we need to realize that until we take cognizance that indeed the system made our counterparts, our white commercial farmers, to be where they are today. It's not just only because of their hard-working efforts. Yes, that's a combination of that. But the environment, the climate, the system was designed in such a manner that actually they will directly be benefiting and resulting in where they are. It was actually a concerted effort to see this where we are today. But to say they can rally behind transformation and support. I would take an example of the Agri-SA transformation report that they are saying the private sector is so much willing to participate and partner with government in terms of growing the black commercial farmers. But if you can scrutinize that report and say, who actually funded this project that they are so proud of? What have they contributed from their pockets? What have they contributed in terms of realizing what they can produce and saying, I would make an example with an organization that where I was, I've just seen a report that says that they have spent about the 3 billion in transformation, but using whose money to transform that? The very same state money that should have played an intervention, meaningful intervention to actually emancipate and empower black farmers has been used by intermediaries to actually sustain them and create employment for their people, and the only little percent went to where it was meant to be used. So it's quite really a shame that when our former president extended a hand and as you said with Bishop Tutu and said, this is a rainbow nation, we thought that you would know that African people are good, have good heart naturally. We thought that, well, our fellow counterparts will genuinely see this as an opportunity to grow a country that is inclusive in terms of the economy. But they are actually better off than when they were in the apartheid government.
Wonderful. Just to move, I mean, I share a lot of your sentiments actually, because I know for a fact that a lot of the resources that are used by some of the white farming groups to drive the so-called transformation projects, which is basically providing training and a few input supports to smallholder farmers. Some of that money comes from the jobs fund. It's government money. It's not their money. It doesn't come from their pockets. It doesn't come from industry. In some instances where they get money from the land bank, it's a state-owned entity money. So, but it's covered in reports as if white farming organizations are making a huge sacrifice to empower. It's a shame, actually. It's a shame. It's a shame. And unfortunately, it continues because we have a toothless government. We have a roaring lion with no teeth. You would not imagine a lot of what's happening today to happen in the past, where politically government that is an Afrikaner government, for an example, allowing other groups continue to prosper at the expense of their own. It would never have happened. I mean, I read the book, I think the first book that Jan Christian Smarts wrote, titled A Century of Wrong. I think he wrote it just at the cusp of the Anglo-Boer War. And if you didn't see the author and you were just reading the book, you would thought it was written by a black person complaining about injustices, because this is what he was doing in this book. He was complaining about the English injustices and calling for justice, for fairness, for the plight of the white Afrikaner in South Africa, Boer in South Africa, to be taken care of. He was standing on a pedestal of freedom and justice. But we seem to have very short memories, because black people are in that position today, but they are not promoted as much as the white Africans groups were promoted historically. As I said, after the Union of South Africa in 1910, immediately they established the land bank for this group. Everything that had to be done that was for economic prosperity was directed at transforming the Afrikaners from economic and social backwardness to modernity. And that project was successful. You hardly find white South Africans at the bottom of the rank. The unemployment stats amongst them, tiny. about 6% or even lower than that, compared to over 25% for blacks. Managerial positions in the corporates are by and large occupied by our white counterparts. Economic ownership, just patterns of economic ownerships are skewed and so on. So we simply have a government that is not serious about transformation. It's a roaring lion. They speak a lot of rhetoric, a lot of plans, but you will not find a serious concerted effort to take risk on behalf of Black South Africans. Now, coming back to some of the challenges faced by farmers in these communities that you work in, which I am very familiar with. I go to the Eastern Cape 4 to 6 times a year because we have a project we fund out of our pocket to promote a group of farmers, 44 individuals who are in a cooperative, half of whom are women. And we committed to this project because we know that it can succeed. These are committed farmers. And I can tell you the challenges. And this is not the only community we interact with. We also interact with other farming communities in the surrounding areas. They have challenges of fencing, the fencing, access to land, because there is this competition, between livestock, farming land, and human settlement. Those three things compete, and it's real. It's not theory. It's real. Then there is some communities, especially towards, not far from your areas, if towards, say, Kokstad after Mount Frere, in the Tabangulu area, those areas are water-starved. You can give those people support to plant vegetables, but they have no water. They want water to drink. They have shortage of it. In the community where we have a project, for 3 months, they have not had water as a result of municipal challenges. Infrastructure is poor. Even if they were to produce sustainably, the infrastructure is simply poor. And some of these problems are non-existent. Some of these problems are government-related problems. And then you get to the value chain. No one can say this is a government problem per se, because we have silos in South Africa. We know who owns silos in South Africa. These silos are monopolized by white commercial groups. It's not theory. It's practice. It's real. We know who seed companies. We know who own processing facilities. We know who sells fertilizers. They might not sell you fertilizers if they see that you're a competitor, because the whole system has been a closed system. So these problems, we can sit here and talk about these problems. But in your own experience, at least I would imagine that you've overcome some of these because you are commercially strong.
You would really not say commercially strong. It's just out of this season, really, where we have seen the benefits of the 11 years experience of going home ultimately with nothing, that we have actually worked for contractors who were working for you then before we have our own mechanization. You have worked for marketing agents whom we were working with them before. You literally remain with nothing. So it's just the serious intervention of realization that until government makes a concerted effort of saying that Black farmers needs a targeted support to be commercialized. At least the Pakistan strategy made them to realize that you need to focus your resources towards a particular group of farmers that says, let's collect whatever little resources we have and then make an impact here. So the Eastern Cape Rural Development Department of Agrarian Reform with Chifada, they really did make that intervention that can actually we are able to see a light at the end of the tunnel to say we are actually farming, where we are now able to say with the reserves that we retain from the last season, we are able to reinvest to our farming entities. A lot of our farmers were able, for the first time, some of them to buy a tractor on their own.
Wow.
That was realized this season because of those interventions. So the value chain is a serious challenge that we will really need. I want to come to be looked at. I want to come to the issue of the silos. We've just learned that AFGRI is selling their silos, which are aware that what happened, how did they acquire, how did those silos came into their hands. We had a meeting with them. We're still waiting for them to provide us with detailed information of saying the silos that are now 60% foreign owned. How did they came to AFGRI hands from the apartheid government? So we in good faith, we talking with them to say that transaction should be an inclusive transaction. That transaction can never be a BEE transaction. It actually must be a broad-based black economic empowerment transaction benefiting broader community of farmers in this country who can have access to silo ownership. We would make every effort to make sure that that transaction is inclusive and is transformative in nature.
Now, getting into the issues of transformation, there's a big debate in South Africa currently on land reform, accelerating land reform, expropriation without compensation. One side says that this creates policy uncertainty. This will lead to decline in food security. It exposes South Africans or South Africa to serious economic vulnerabilities. The other side says, well, it's been years, it's been decades that Black people have been waiting to have equitable share of the asset of the land, because the land is not just you don't use it just to plant. Yes, you plant on the land. The land is also used as a collateral to leverage capital, to grow your asset base for human settlement as well. It's also used to create intergenerational equity. So there seems to be a very narrow view of land, as if the owners of the land are just owning this to plant. Whereas, yes, they plant, but also they use it to build equity, to build a capital base, to create prosperity. So where in your interaction with Black commercial farmers, where do they stand? Where do you stand in this debate on land reform and expropriation without compensation, as well as titles for those who are in former homelands?
I've actually myself applied for access to farm or to have a farm the past 11 years. Because of the demand up to today, I still don't have a farm. As I said, I farm in a space where there is it's a military base. It's a military camp.
So you're leasing the land?
I'm actually leasing the land from the military. So I am one of those that says that the goodwill, the good principle that we thought would work of a willing buyer, willing seller, failed us. It's amazing that there are people who would say expropriation without compensation will actually collapse the economy. It's a fallacy, because most South Africans are saying they are Christians. It's a Christian country. But if you could go to section 25 of the book of Leviticus and read on the issues of Jubilee.
That's verse 25.
Chapter 25 of the Leviticus. It's about the whole chapter is actually dedicated to land issues. So 1913 to 2013 has been 100 years that they should have said at least we have benefited out of the wealth created by that land. It's time that we pass over to other generations, to other groups that were excluded. Because that should have been every 50 years, Leviticus says, if you have taken somebody's land, either he owed you, either you robbed him of that land, either it was during war. After 50 years, you have to return that land to the original owner. But we are so hypocritical that we can't even practice what we say we believe in terms of the Bible. So the issue of expropriation without compensation, Black commercial farmers are looking forward that it can be realized. And expropriation does not only limit it to the land. The infrastructure, the agricultural infrastructure must be expropriated to benefit those for so many years who have been excluded from the structural economy of this country. So we fully for the expropriation without compensation.
I've just recently learned, I'm still going to do a bit of research on this, that in New Zealand, the land issue has been resolved in a particular way where land has been transferred to Aboriginal groups for future generations. Not just land, but also airspaces are off limit to other groups. Or rather, the Aboriginal groups have been allocated certain benefits with respect to the space asset as part of justice, of redress. Historically, it's recognized, and to extend that land purchases are now off limit to foreigners. No foreigner can purchase land in Sweden. They used to purchase land until recently, but now they can't purchase land. They can only lease because of the sensitivity and the consciousness of the justice issues around land and the Aboriginal groups. In South Africa, we're not even anywhere near such radical propositions. And people talk about willing buyer, willing seller. There is nowhere you can go to the Constitution, you can go to policy documents. I've never seen such a principle. This principle crept in, I think, as a result of a World Bank study a long time ago that talked about market-based transactions, not willing buyer, willing seller, because willing buyer, willing seller gives power to the seller, irrespective of how they acquired that asset, how they acquired that land. In Zimbabwe, as far as my understanding of that country's history goes, there was a willing buyer, willing seller principle that was built into the Lancaster Agreement. And there were a series of agreements that accompanied that, including, the fact that you had in Parliament 20 seats allocated to the white community in Zimbabwe, to white parties that were uncontested. No one could contest them. They were given for free. And that was built into their constitutional arrangement. And they own vast tracts of land in Malbrain, Marlborough, and other massive tracts of land, wildlife. The tourism industry was owned. The ownership patterns were skewed. Similarly, in South Africa, the assets, the land in South Africa, wildlife, your game reserves, your game lodges, your hospitality sector, your farmland. It's owned largely by a small minority. And Black, you go to Kailicha, you go to Orange Farm, you go to the reserves in the rural, the totally uneconomic, unproductive, deliberately because of the policies of the past, all the places that are in the backwaters that are poor. So poverty and blackness go together, which is a powerful psychological force that needs to be a fetter that needs to be broken, because future generations will condemn us for not doing anything about these inequitable patterns of ownership, where the black skin is associated with poverty and underdevelopment, and as they say, laziness, when actually they are the ones who build this economy. The roads are built by the farm. Those who farm, those who hold the title of these farms, eat with us in these restaurants. Yeah. They have drones there and the farm laborers, but they're here, they in suits. Sometimes you see them in khakis just as a trophy, but they are in these fancy restaurants here. So, they're so-called white commercial farmers. So this is really sad that we are 25 years into democracy and people are threatening that this country will go down if land reform is promoted. And this brings me to a survey that was recently released by the Human Sciences Research Council on the attitudes towards land reform by race groups. 61% of white South Africans surveyed, of the total that was surveyed, 61% of them are against land reform. It's a research, it's an academic research. It's not a perception. 79% of blacks want land reform. So we are a polarized country over historical redress and justice issues. So that for me is quite sad. Now, going to some of the last questions that we should explore. You have recently been appointed or elected as the interim chairperson of the South African Grain Association. Yet we have Grain South Africa as a representative body of grain producing farmers in South Africa. Why did you, and I understand the South African Sugar Association also now has a parallel structure that is transformation minded, like SAGRA, the South African Grain Association, and other commodity groups, as I understand, there's a breaking apart or a creation of parallel structures. Why was there a need to create the South African Grain Association when there's grain in South Africa?
Prof. S., I said we're naive to believe that the goodwill of the narrative of the Rainbow Nation would have worked for us. I am reminded of one farmer in Northwest 8 years back when we had a meeting with black farmers. We were talking with him. He was not a member of Grain South Africa. Then I'm recruiting, asking him to join us. And he refused and said, you will never transform that organization.
Grain South Africa.
Grain South Africa. I counteracted him and say, well, you would see in a matter of time, that organization would be transformed and be reflective of the demographics of this country. Yesterday, I phoned him and I said to him, my friend, you are correct. I should have agreed with you 8 years back. We thought that we were working with genuine people, genuine at heart, who meant what they said. But seemingly, you would find that we would have meetings during the day to agree on other issues, not knowing that there were some meetings who said before the formal meeting was set, and which actually counteracted what we would be discussing. The commercialization of black farmers has never been in the agenda of Grain SA and will never be in the agenda of Grain SA. I can challenge them to say they can show off. For instance, Northwest gave them some money for recapitalization, close to about 89 million. And they charged management fee of 10% out of that to sustain their so-called farmer development. Out of that, they can't show today which farmers they commercialize out of that 89 million or so. 2 weeks back, they were parading one of our farmers or one colleague who is still a member of Grain SA, Mr. Matatiele, that he is the farmer of the year, awarding him to be the farmer of the year. But if today you can interview that farmer and say,
he doesn't have land, as far as I know.
He does have land. He bought land himself.
Oh, okay.
If you can ask me and say, what contribution did Grain SA programs impacted in your life that you were able to be deserving, awarding commercial farmer? They pick any farmer who has struggled on his own and survived and is successful, put them in a program 4 months, 1 year or so, then all of a sudden he's paraded to say he's the farmer of the year. But actually, they are not in that program of commercializing black farmers. They are interested in the food gardens of those people that they will skill them, yes, produce, employ good farming practices to get good yields on those small hectares. But at the end of the day, when they harvest those people, they don't even have market. That maize is rotting in those people are sitting with that maize, not knowing what to do with it, because not proper work was done to say the strategy of saying, how are we going to market this maize after these people have harvested? So I'm not convinced anymore.
Then someone would ask you, how is your organization, SAGRA, the South African Grain Association, going to be different? What will it be doing? We've heard about what Grain SA is not doing. What is your organization going to be doing?
Our organization, its focus is to see that black commercial farmers are commercialized. For example, I've made an example with where I'm farming at home, where on our own efforts, we came together and make sure that we needed to produce profitably and sustainably. And we created a vehicle in the name of Matatiele Grain Co. Now we're saying we are on our own as black farmers. And therefore, the unity of us is imperative to see that no slave master can free us in terms of being able to play the meaningful role in the sector. And therefore, we will confront our government. They don't have audacity to say when they have to do the right thing of correcting the injustice of the past, that they are threatened of food security, and they bow to that. For how long black people are going to starve? How many black people are living under poverty lines? Because there are no meaningful interventions of creating wealth in the industry. So we would challenge the status quo as South African Grain Farmers Association, and in partnership with the government, request them to divert those resources, but not only making a dependency on government. We would use crowdfunding to actually challenge your AFCRI of today to say, yes, we could have together a muscle of buying those silos if they were fairly bought by them, buying back to South Africans those silos. Citizens will be able to see and realize that together we can do better, combine as farmers, so that our freedom must be in our own hands, not in someone's hands.
And what's your membership base and what's your coverage? Are you just in SAGRA, just in Matatiele? What is your membership base?
That's the narrative of our counterparts where they're saying, well, no, those are individual farmers who are doing our membership base. We have members in Northwest, we have members in Free State, we have members in the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, we have members in Gauteng who are actually already black commercial farmers, but who would need just that support to in a way be sustainable and play, particularly in the value chain. We need to disrupt the status quo in the value chain that it is inclusive. So our membership base is throughout the country.
Now, the last question. It's here we've spoken passionately about the sector, and I'm as angry as you are because I work in the sector. I'm an academic, I'm a writer, but I have a passion in the sector because my historical roots are in the rural areas. I've seen my father farming with a few livestock. He still, today he's at 84, he still goes to the plantation fields. and we've looked at what they are doing, and we took a keen interest in the conditions under which they are farming. And it's sad, it's a shame. I have eyes to see, I have a brain to analyze. I can see that what we have taken as normal in South Africa is an abnormality, that a majority doesn't have access to asset ownership. There's asset poverty, there's income poverty. Black South Africans have multidimensional poverty. The playing field is not equal. Playing field is not leveled. You can see that, but we've absorbed it as normal to see a black person begging on the streets. If you see a white fellow begging on the street, you think they should not be there, and you quite keen to give them money because it's abnormal. They disturb our psychology to see, that kind of a thing, or a white person who is unemployed. It disturbs our psycho. But blacks, fine, we used to you, that's your place. That's what has been fed in our minds through the Verwoerdian years. And we just want to correct that. That's all. We're not saying we want to bring black apartheid on whites. No, we want to share the wealth of the country. We want our, the future generations. We want to build a new narrative in South Africa to be more imaginative about the possibilities in the future. Perhaps something that has never been seen in another country, where black and white coexist, but as equals, not on the basis of an abstract rainbow nation, a romantic idea that has no roots, that has no concrete in material terms, in terms of the material structure of the economy. That's it. So the last question to close off. Here we are, two men talking about land, agriculture. You work in the rural areas, in the former homelands, where historically women have been systematically marginalized by blacks, by black men. And I want to challenge you to ask you, what are you doing to disrupt? We want to disrupt the white economy here nationally, but what are you doing to disrupt the gender imbalances in patterns of asset ownership where you are?
Well, around the issue of gender and women farmers, we have members who are women farmers in our organization, SACRA, who are contributing meaningfully to whatever little they are doing in their farming entities. I would make an example that I'm here now. The farm at home, my wife is keeping and maintaining and farming, whilst I'm trying to mobilize and work and make sure that this organization survives.
You're in Gauteng now.
I am in Gauteng now, and she's in the Eastern Cape. I was talking to her this morning. There was a man who was coming from Gauteng here, who was going to Mthatha, who wanted to buy rams. I had to give him my wife's phone. She went with the kraal to the kraal with him and sold that ram to that gentleman. And when she has to dose she gets into the crawl. It's not an African tradition that we used to know that there shouldn't be any women coming closer to the crawl. That isn't the status quo anymore. So by so saying, we have a percentage of women who are coming on board in terms of farming. And we are encouraging that because we know the role that women can play, that historically they have been playing in terms of farming. No matter how little in those households, they were always tilling the land and making sure that the vegetables are in the garden, everything is there. Children, before they go to school, they will eat something from home, from the garden. So we expanding from that, and we being inclusive even in our structures. We have women.
Awesome. Wonderful. This was really a great conversation, firecracking conversation. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I think we should call a spade by its name, as a spade. We should speak clearly. I think it's time now that South Africans of all races talk openly with one another and to one another, because if we are not, our children and our grandchildren will spit on our graves, will say we were failures, we didn't do much to advance social justice, to advance equity in the country. So it's you and I who must pursue this struggle. If we lose friends, we must lose friends, but it's the future. We have to think multi-generationally. Let's leave it on that note. Thank you so much for coming to the show, and I look forward to listening to our conversation.
Thank you, Prof. Lovely.
Thank you for tuning in to Perspectives with Mzu.